why I decided to do this. So I'm issuing a challenge. I'm calling it the Tattoo Challenge. And it's very simple. I'm leaving it up to my viewers and subscribers to get me to 5,000 subscribers before the 16th of August 2020. And if you guys help me get there, I get a tattoo. Yeah. And not just any tattoo, one that is chosen by you guys. Throughout the course of the month, I'll be having live streams with you guys to determine or to decide what tattoo design I should get. By the end, if I do get 5,000 subscribers before the 16th of August, I'll do a poll with the top 3 suggestions and you guys decide what tattoo I get. It's really that simple. There's more details, but you can follow a link in the description below, which I've left there. Tattoo Challenge, just follow that link and you'll get all the information of how this is going to work. So also, let me just make one thing clear. I don't like needles. I'm petrified of needles. I do have one tattoo and that was a mission to get. So this isn't gonna be easy for me. But I promise, if you guys get me to 5,000 subscribers before the 16th of August, I'm gonna get that tattoo. And hey, at least it'll be a really funny story to tell people. And a tattoo is permanent. So please share and let people know the crazy crap that I'm trying to do right now. Anyway, with that being said, enjoy the show. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Let's Talk. This is a very exciting edition of Let's Talk. I have managed to track down a very interesting person. She is a doctor, and she will explain in a moment what field she's in. But she's willing to talk to me about critical thinking and critique it, so to speak. I'm going to let her explain a little bit more exactly what she's gone through and how the conversation will go, or at least the topics we'll talk about. But she has a very interesting story, which I think needs to be spoken about. Her name, of course, is Dr. Dioné Harley. You can see her on my right. Say hi, doctor. So once again, thank you so much for joining me on the show. So if you want to just give a brief introduction about yourself and what you do.
Sure. I started studying philosophy in my undergrad, and I went up to master's level at Wits University. And then I decided I wanted to become an academic philosopher. And so I was told that to be competitive in the field, I needed to study overseas. So I then went to London in England to study at University College London, where I did my MPhil in philosophy. And then I moved to Canada to do my PhD at the University of Western Ontario. So I was there for 4 years. Unfortunately, by the end of that journey, I realized that I didn't want to be in the academy anymore. It's not because I didn't love philosophy. I still love philosophy, mainly because I think it's an excellent educational tool, but because the academy has become a space of ideological domination. And if you don't go along with that worldview, then you are ostracized, and in various insidious ways, you're attacked. And I didn't want to constantly be fighting that battle for quality education rather than brainwashing. And so I decided to come back to South Africa and leave the field, which was devastating for me because it had taken me 12 years to reach my goal. And so now I work in advertising as a copywriter instead.
Wow, that's a major shift. Okay, so just let me address some of the comments that have come in. Unati saying hi. He's here to take notes. Good evening all from Mr. Punisher. Rudy saying hi. All the usual suspects, and there's a few more. Francois saying, where is Bianca? Well, okay, so obviously earlier today, let me just address this now. Earlier today, I said, hey, I would love to see the doctor and Bianca have a discussion about critical theory. And let me put it out there. I will host it, and I will be the moderator, and I will be unbiased, neutral, and make sure that the conversation flows civilized and peacefully. Both sides will have the opportunity to say what they want to say, and I'll make sure that both sides are heard. And that's literally the environment it's going to be in, and you guys can watch it live and also ask questions that they can also answer. We want it to be dignified and civilized, and I think it will be a very interesting conversation to have. So anybody who knows Bianca that's watching this, let her know. But today we are here to talk about the good doctor's experience, as she just mentioned, with academics and the left. And, I think a lot of people have heard stories or rumors that this goes on. There have been a few that have said, yeah, it's very left way thinking, and then you have the other side that says, no, it's not. It's progressive and all that stuff. So, are you okay with going into detail about what you went through?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, the floor is yours.
Okay, so just to be clear, my area of specialization is ancient philosophy and ethics. So I did my thesis in Aristotelian ethics. So the thing is, when I first got to Canada, it was essentially for me a massive shift from how things were done from going to University College London, then suddenly going to Canada. It was literally like I entered a new world. And I think it's because in Canada it had already started gaining steam. We hadn't seen the effects of that yet in England. And the reason why it concerns me is that I think that most people don't understand how extensive and how damaging this ideological movement has become in a place where we are trying to train the people in society that will have a lot of influence. So you're talking about educators who are molding young minds, and these are the journalists, the politicians, the all of the people that have a say in how society views things. They are going out there and producing material. So it's not everyone thinks that the academy, or the ivory tower, as they like to call it in a derogatory way, is so removed from the real world. It is not removed from the real world. What's going on in there is trickling down into society, and we're seeing that now. Um, and the worst of all is that when that stuff trickles down to us, we also in South Africa tend to take it on board without criticizing it, without thinking, does it fit our context? Does it fit our history? Does it solve the problems we have? Instead, we just take that ideology on, we use those concepts, but we don't actually understand how it's going to affect our reality. So for me, it really sunk in so in philosophy, um, there are way more men than there are women studying philosophy. And this has for a long time been perceived as a problem. I mean, philosophy has really been in the top three disciplines for disparities in terms of gender. Um, Now, I've been in three philosophy departments in three continents. I've never experienced sexism. And that's not to say it doesn't happen. Please let me make the blanket statement like we always have to.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there's no such thing as racism. I'm not saying there's no such thing as sexism. And I'm not saying it never happens. What I'm saying is that to make a blanket statement that because there's a disparity, it means there's discrimination is just incorrect. It is false. A disparity does not mean there is discrimination. Okay? It could be that, but it could be many other things.
Mm.
So when I got to Western had been singled out as a university that had a particular problem. So it was seen as an unhealthy climate in terms of the gender relations. That it had like a label. So they had this woman come in who was supposed to now assess the climate at our department. And so part of that was essentially just talking to the women. So basically calling them into a room and discussing what the climate is like there. Now, I didn't attend because I'd never experienced it and I didn't see the point of going. But a friend of mine did, and she's Canadian. And so the woman asked them they must go around the room and each person must say what they've experienced. And when it came to her, she said, "Oh, well, no, I haven't experienced anything." And then the woman carried on talking. And at the end of the discussion, she asked them, "So what do you guys think we should do to alleviate this situation?" When it was her turn to speak, she said, "No, no, you don't get to speak because you haven't experienced it."
Okay.
It's literally in one breath. No, 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 this is a safe space. This is where, because you're a woman, you can say whatever you want to say, as long as you say what I want you to say. And if you don't say what I want you to say, no, then you don't get to speak.
A common theme.
Common theme. It's unbelievable. And that was also the first time that I had come across this idea that there was this field called critical theory. I'd never heard of this before. So I asked them, what is critical theory? And they all looked at me like, well, the explanation I got was, well, it's like philosophy, but it's not really philosophy. I was like, I don't know what that means. So eventually, I found out that critical theory is a discipline where the people who are studying it essentially have already made the assumption that there is oppression and there is domination, and what they do is they unpack texts. And so, maybe it's like a literature, it's a book that they unpack, and they have to identify who is the oppressor, how is the oppressor being inflicting this on the victim, and who's the victim, and how is this all operating. Now, the reason that strikes me as uneducational and the complete opposite of critical thinking is because you're already making the assumption that there is some sort of oppressive dynamic. Whereas if you were just doing it in a philosophical context, you wouldn't be able to just make that assumption. You would first have to show that there is an oppressive dynamic. So in that regard, critical theory, in my opinion, is immediately unsound insofar as there seems to be no burden of proof on them to first demonstrate that there is some form of oppression going on. So, for example, the one that keeps coming up in Northern America, which is quite astounding, is again this idea of if there's a disparity, there must be discrimination. So, for example, the gender wage gap. There's a disparity, so it must be discrimination. It's not. Christina Hofstadter, so many people have statistics and shown that it doesn't explain the choices that women make. It doesn't explain the fact that women are less likely to work extra hours. They're more likely to work part-time. There are lots of considerations that would explain that disparity, and it has nothing to do with discrimination.
What if we bring it home to South Africa? I think a good example would also be, this whole idea of like saying that there's oppression, the idea of the eternal apartheid. And speaking of which, Quentin is in the chat. He says hi. And for those of you who haven't, please go read his article on the eternal apartheid. It is well worth a read. And I also interviewed him about that conversation. You can go into my playlist, Let's Talk, and you'll find it. So yeah, I think, is that a good example to say that we hang on to apartheid as a oppression?
Yeah, and we also, I think at this point, it's clear to so many of us that that's just being used as a scapegoat. I don't think in this country it's even feasible anymore to suggest that what we're experiencing now is a function of that. I mean, honestly, if I'm the one thing I keep thinking about is the fact that, so even on Twitter, I was trying to have a discussion about systemic racism. And I was trying to basically start the discussion at the point of what evidence is there in South Africa? So I'm not talking about the overseas case, but what evidence is there in South Africa for the existence of systemic racism? So I'm saying let's not just make the assumption, what would count as evidence in this case? So obviously it's a part of the discourse on the left is that if you even ask certain questions, you're racist. But come on, guys, that is so blatantly a rhetorical device to shut down any sort of dissent. I mean, that's not, come on. Like, I can't take that seriously. So they keep saying, well, educate yourself. You must know what's going on. And my feeling is, but when I try and ask what it is, you shut it down. So when I don't know what I'm doing wrong and I ask you, I can't do that either. So how am I supposed to educate myself?
It's like your friend. Sorry, it's like your friend that was in that thing. She didn't say what she wanted what they wanted her to say. So then they're like, well, no, you can't say anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, so people were very upset with me for asking the question. I got a couple of responses, but I mean, the one that was brought up was the inequality that we're seeing in South Africa. And yes, inequality is a problem, but I don't think it's as simple as saying it's because of systemic racism. Because if anything, so much since apartheid, since 94, the government has taken so many measures to try and dismantle that system of oppression. So how is it that inequality has worsened the more the state has gotten involved in the market? How is that not an indication that what is destroying the country are the socialist policies that are continuously creeping into the market? It it's incredible to me that it's the one thing that someone did mention. I don't know if anyone knows enough about this because I've tried to research it, but I'm not finding a lot. Is So one person said that on average, black people are still paid less for the same work with the same amount of experience and the same qualifications. I don't know how true that is. My feeling is that if it were that blatant that a company is paying its black employees less, um, it's such a blatant form of racism that it would be incredible if that hadn't leaked out or the government hadn't stepped in. So I would be happy for someone to give me more information about this, because for me then that would be a clear case of systemic racism. But this just goes to show that there are ways of proving that it exists. But why am I marked as a villain for asking for that evidence?
Absolutely. Just to answer your question, I think the dodgy idealist who's joined, thank you for watching, is answering your question. Says, I work with loads of contracts. He says it's false. Or she says it's false. I'm not sure if it's a man or a woman. But yeah, that's one answer there.
And the one thing I want to say about critical theory as well is that the moment that it reaches a point where empirical evidence is lacking, the left tends to shift gears, and then they say, oh, okay, so if our evidence doesn't fit your definition of evidence, then, it doesn't count. And this is where they're no longer floating in the realm of critical theory, because critical theorists, they use empirical evidence. They approach things in an interdisciplinary way. So they're not trying to shy away from empirical evidence. They believe in notions like reason, justice. They're about emancipation. Essentially, they believe in the idea of a meta-narrative. They just think that it is broken, or it is faulty in a certain way and it needs to be corrected. But the moment you start saying things like, oh no, it's just your notion of truth, or it's my notion, that's not critical theory, that's postmodernism. You've drifted into a form of relativism where you don't even think there's such a thing as truth. There's literally your definition of something and my definition of something. And the reason why that is just nonsensical is because postmodernism is self-defeating. If there's no such thing as truth, then on what grounds is postmodernism as a theory true?
Yes.
It can't be true.
That's very true.
But you can't point this out, because then again you're racist, or you basically then let's talk about the white fragility issue. So I did have someone accuse me of that. So
was it Konrad Koch?
I don't remember.
I'm sorry, I had to. Konrad, if you watch it, come on, you say that all the time, so it's not secret.
So someone did accuse me of white fragility. But again, I mean, looking into that idea, it's like, how is it a remarkable insight to suggest that people don't easily believe things that they don't yet believe? They're not going to be easily convinced by it. It's a standard human state. It's not anything new. It's not anything different. And I can easily just switch that around. I mean, I can just throw it right back and say, well, you're also fragile because you also don't want to be persuaded by evidence that you don't already find persuasive. But that's the human condition.
Exactly.
It's not a racist thing. It's not again, it's not to slap a race term onto it. It doesn't make it any more legitimate or
I
give it any more weight.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think the way that they use the accusation of like, oh well, if you don't agree with me, then you're racist. They're actually um, devaluing the, if I can use that term, the word racism. Because now it's getting to a point where I think every white individual who hears the word racist, it's like water off a duck's back. It's like, oh, please save me from
Exactly.
from that, like, oh, do you not have a better insult or whatever, and it's like they roll their eyes, and almost to a point, if someone on the left calls you a racist, it's like, well, it's getting to that point where you start to think, well, then I've won the argument because now you're insulting me and you have
Oh,
nothing better to say.
yeah. Um, I mean, even the term microaggression, again, um, what they don't want to accept is that those are not legitimate terms because they're supposed to point to psychological phenomena, which is science, and those terms haven't cashed out. Uh, they haven't even settled on a definition for microaggressions because even in cultural groups, some people find certain things offensive, other people don't care. So they can't even amongst themselves they wouldn't be able to decide what counts as a microaggression, and more than that, they haven't been able to establish that there's a causal connection between that and someone's self-esteem or somehow essentially how it's affecting someone. So again, it's not to say that people don't have these subtle ways of putting other people down, of saying these slightly racist, so sort of these innuendos. Of course, it happens, but it's not those occurrences is not enough to warrant the creation of a new concept that actually singles out a particular phenomenon. And so it doesn't, I mean, again, all evidence for this is there. I mean, literally, you just have to Google it. What I'm saying is nothing new. The only thing I can contribute that is maybe a little bit different are the experiences I've had. One of them was for me so shocking was this new this new trend in the academy where if you don't like the conclusions of someone's argument, you raise a petition to get their paper retracted from a journal.
What?
So, yeah,
Isn't
no, it
that
happens a
censorship
lot.
though?
So, yeah, so in the academy, the place where free thought is supposed to be protected above all else. So, one philosopher, Rebecca Tuville, she wrote a paper called In Defense of Transracialism. And the paper was essentially arguing that if you buy into the logic that supports transgenderism, that transgenderism is possible, by the same token, you will have to accept transracialism is also possible. So basically, on the outside, you could be white, but on the inside, you feel that you're black. Okay? So she was saying that it's the exact same logic. So that's where that position takes you.
The whole idea of I identify as.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but of course, the left hated the conclusion. So they accused her of, how did they put it? But essentially, they were attacking her ability as a scholar. So they were saying it was poor scholarship. She didn't read the right authors, meaning she didn't read the authors that they said, on the list of people whose positions you should support.
Mhm.
And they signed a petition, and I feel really embarrassed to say this, but some of the lecturers from my department signed that petition
Wow.
to get the paper retracted. Now, in the academy, if you don't agree with someone's position, you write a paper as a response,
Yeah.
and you also have it sent to a peer-reviewed journal and have it published. That is how we further knowledge, is through discourse.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When that happened, I was also like, what's the point of this?
Mhm.
Because if it's reached the point where even in philosophy, we are not free to explore any sort of thinking.
And philosophy is by nature supposed to be free thought. I mean, some of the most fundamental and expressive and interesting philosophies came out of free thinking. Yes, some of them may not be the best, or some of them might be outlandish, but they're allowed to exist. It's just like with Conrad's article. I know I keep bringing him up, but I really have nothing against the guy. I'm sure I know he's a good person, but I just don't agree with his politics. Um, and some of the things that he said, especially defending this whole Leon Schuster thing and stuff like that. And my article was an opinion piece on how cancel culture is affecting arts. And art, like philosophy, is subjective. Some people will like it, some people won't. It's fine. It's allowed. Both opinions are allowed to exist in this world. But the moment you start, having a different opinion and being canceled because of it, we're not in a democracy anymore. We're not in a liberal society, and yet these lefties scream for it and say, "Oh no, but you're allowed to. You're allowed to think the way you think, but you gotta think my way," as we've been discussing.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think a lot of people on the left will say, well, no, that's a reasonable response to that. She basically deserves the response because this is the consequence of her saying that. But again, this is now people who want to deny that there is such a thing as cancel culture. There's a difference between, like I said, which is how it usually is done. You write your own paper in response and submit it to a journal. In this case, she's a lecturer just starting out. The damage it does to her career, she could have lost her job because of it. Luckily, her department at least supported her, which I thought was great.
Great.
But if they tried to, just play the game, it could ruin her entire career. Do you know how hard it is to get a job in philosophy? It's almost impossible, honestly.
All right. Well,
That,
let's get back to your experience. So you went to university. You were studying this thing. You experienced this thing with your friend. And before I continue, I just want to say to the people that are commenting, I do see the comments and I do see the questions. I will probably try and leave 10 minutes at the end of the show to get to all of them. They're very good questions, and we have Wotan in the chat. So thank you so much for tuning in, buddy. He's cracking some jokes. I think you're gonna like them. But he says I have to read this one. He says, I now identify as a white man, which I think is quite funny. But yeah, I will get to the questions, I promise. I just really want the doctor to tell her story of what she's experienced. I feel that it's very important that people hear what she went through. So please continue from where you left off.
well, while we're talking about the odd terms that are, I mean, look, they're bringing these terms into being because they think that it creates a legitimate theory, because you're creating a specific kind of discourse. So it creates a certain kind of impression, but again, the question is it substantiated by evidence? And the moment they don't like what they get, then they move to postmodernism and say, well, it's just your version of truth or some nonsense. But the other uh, instance I would like to mention, just because it's again just blew me away, was so we were being trained to become teachers. So we had workshops where we would be taught about how to deal with certain things and how to teach, how to teach differently and all of this. One of the workshops was how do we handle students who disrupt class and stuff like that. But and how do we handle students who don't respond well to feedback and things like that. So the one student, so she's my fellow PhD student, she put up her hand and said, so are we supposed to deal with ableist language in the essays? And I had never heard this term before, so I had no idea what she was talking about. And eventually she explained what ableist language is. So she said that, well, you can't say things like, I see your point of view, because not everyone can see. Some people are blind. So you can't say the word see. And you can't say if I stand up for what I believe in, because some people can't stand. So you can't say that in your essay.
Wow.
I I thought that was a joke. I honestly thought it was. I almost started laughing, and then I looked around and saw everyone had this very serious expression on their face, and I was like, "Oh shit, this is real."
What?
Uh, she tried to have this conversation with, when we were teaching a course, she tried to have this conversation with the lecturer who was the instructor. And she said to him the way that the essay questions had been phrased, it contained ableist language. And eventually he didn't understand what she was talking about. And so she kept explaining. And then he said to her, oh, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. Literally, it went completely over his head. And we all just burst out laughing because it's that ridiculous.
Mm.
Again, they don't understand the consequences of what they're saying. So if you can't say the word see or stand, well, then you also can't use the word understand, because some people can't understand because they're mentally handicapped.
Yeah.
Then I can't use the word understand. And of course, we've now lost all nuance in language, where apparently you cannot have a metaphorical way of speaking.
Mm.
Because people will take everything literally and say, well, I can't stand, so you can't make metaphorical statements about standing.
Mm.
It is such an insidious form of control over people,
Absolutely.
that we honestly, we lose all nuance, we lose all organic interaction. I mean, a lot of the things that make life worth living.
But that's a scary thought. I mean, like just your example on stand, for example, like I'm a stand-up comedian. So now that term might change now because not everybody can stand.
Exactly.
Again, it's like where's the line? The way these people think, they just look for it. It's almost like they wake up in the morning and they're like, what can I read? What can I watch? So that I can just mess up the world. I don't know. That's how it feels.
But the thing is, I think the other thing that people tend to say when I bring up these experiences is they say, well, it won't be that bad. I mean, that's just a hyperbolic form of it. But in the real world, it wouldn't look like that. So they think I tend to get carried away with how much of a threat I see it as. And that's what they also said to Jordan Peterson when he came out in opposition to the bill C-16. And they said to him, yeah, but you're overreacting. I mean, there's no way people would abuse law. Shortly after that, Lindsay Shepherd had her experience where so I don't know if you're aware of what happened there. Okay, so Jordan Peterson came out in opposition of Bill C-16 in Canada, which said that um, by law, you have to call a person by their preferred pronoun. So,
Oh, that thing. Okay. Yeah.
so if you don't, so they could take you to court if you didn't. If they say if um, they say that they're a man, or they say anything, you can, if they want to be called them, if they want to be called Z, whatever they want to be called, by law you have to call them that. And his warning was, first of all, that this kind of control from the state is a very dangerous thing, but also that the law would be abused.
Yes.
And everyone said to him, no, you're overreacting. But then shortly after that, Lindsay Shepherd, who was a TA, so a teaching assistant at, can't remember the university, I want to say Waterloo, I'm not sure. She was talking about pronouns in a communications class. And so she thought it would be a good idea in a tutorial to show Jordan Peterson's debate with someone where he was saying we shouldn't support it, and his opponent was saying no, we should. And it was this debate had featured on public television, so it's not like it hadn't aired before. It was something that people could have watched on the TV. So she put this on, and she did what any good teacher would do. She didn't take a position. She gave them both sides of the argument, and she let them make up their minds. She was nailed. She was called transphobic. She was called in. She was raked over the coals, and she asked them, what did I do wrong? And they said, you didn't contextualize the debate by making it clear, essentially, that Jordan Peterson was wrong. So you essentially didn't tell your class that this is the side of the debate you need to end up on.
But But that's not necessarily a debate. A debate by nature is supposed to be opposing.
And also, a good educator doesn't tell their students what to think.
Absolutely.
So what? And these were just university administrators. So what Jordan Peterson had said, that's exactly what happened.
Mm.
They saw an opportunity to interpret it as they liked, and they did.
Mm.
That's why when people say I'm paranoid, or I take it too seriously, I do, because again, it's education. You are molding people's minds. It's a huge responsibility. I take it very seriously.
Mm.
And to see a place like that become opposed to critical thought is the death of the academy.
Mm. Absolutely. And isn't it ironic, though, that they call them that it's called critical theory, but yet it seems that there's only one route to take?
Yeah, I mean, so the one thing I will say in defense of critical theory is that, as opposed to postmodernism, is that it is trying to correct. So even when I did a course called Feminist Critiques in Philosophy of Science, and there are aspects of the position that I do agree with. So Quine is a philosopher of science, and he put forward what's called the underdetermination thesis. And according to this, you can have a set of data that's perfectly compatible with two theories, where the two theories are incompatible with each other. So you can have two theories that oppose each other,
Mm-hmm.
but explain the evidence equally well.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you choose between them? Because the facts are not going to dictate one over the other.
Mm.
So what we do is we have biases, or we allow value judgments to creep in, and that's how we tend to choose theories. We're just not aware of it. So part of the feminist project initially was to expose this, and that is a fair criticism, is to say, well, look, when men were dominating in science, they would tended to choose theories that fit their biases. And so this would then change the notion of objectivity, because it isn't really objective. There's subjectivity. Said that. That's completely true. And so to that extent, the critical theory project is legitimate, because it shows, but that is where it shows you, look, here's what happened, and it can explain it, and it can demonstrate this is what went wrong. So if you read authors like Elizabeth Anderson and Helen Longino, they didn't say we should now abandon objectivity. They say we have to think of how do we allow value judgments to impact our choices in the empirical method. So it's essentially trying to advance science and advance society by understanding how biases work.
Mm. Yeah.
And the other part of it is that critical theorists believe in a positive project. So therefore, destabilizing those oppressive or dominant forces, because they actually want to do something good. They want to further society. And that is a good thing.
Mm.
The problem is that when I look at what the left is doing, I don't see that. I see only destructive forces, and that's postmodernism. Postmodernism has no positive project. It has nothing it's trying to achieve. Whereas critical theory is actually supposed to stand up for freedom.
Mm.
And it also believes in the idea that there should be agents of change, and these agents should be selected. Now, it was in Marxist theory, it was supposed to be the proletariat, but when that failed, these thinkers thought, well, who will be the agents of change? And some of them thought that they should be the agents of change because they're the ones who are thinking about these things. But at the end of the day, they also realized, but that casts them in a paternalistic role. It means that they are now suddenly the judge of what goes and what doesn't go. And that in turn is another form of oppression.
Mm.
And that's what we see. We see that the people are supposed to be the agents of change, so the social justice warriors. By doing what they're doing, they've literally given rise to a new form of oppression. And they are only, it seems to me, they're only interested in the destructive project. Here's a question I have. Um, I was thinking about this. So let's say that we conceded everything that the left wants us to concede. So let's say we just said, you know what, you're right. White fragility, it's totally a thing. Microaggression is totally a thing. We are, white people in this country, everything is apartheid's fault. What then?
Thank you for asking that.
What then? It's like that quote that Cyril Ramaphosa tweeted about. Yes, but they just want people to take responsibility for what they've done and make amends. Okay, what does that look like? What do you want us to do? So let's say we just go along with everything. Now what?
I think it'll just be machines, to be honest, unable to really think for ourselves. And everyone will be disclaiming everything they say. So when you start a conversation, oh, by the way, I am identified as wada 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 wa, and I don't mean any insult when I say da 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 da. And before we can even have a conversation, it's been half an hour because we've been disclaiming so that we don't get cancelled, and to, in a way, just be like, this is how I feel, this is who I am. Are you ready to engage in conversation? Because God forbid you have an opinion on something and disagrees with the person that you're about to engage with. I think we're going to redefine and reterm almost everything that exists on this planet, because of, like you said, things like stand is now offensive to someone or whatever. So terms will be changed, places will be changed. Everything will just become this utopia of change, yes, but a change that comes at a price of our own God-given human rights.
Yeah. I mean, but in a more practical sense, I mean, I've seen there've been some really odd stories about, it's not explicit, but that, certain departments will only hire women for a certain period of time. I'm genuinely interested to see what when so must universities only hire black people? Must they? But then it cuts across. Must they only hire women? How is that going to improve anything? I mean,
Yeah.
given the current situation we're in with unemployment, um, it's unclear to me what it is they're trying to achieve, because I think they're so busy with the destructive aspect of what they're doing that they actually haven't given any thought to what would they put in its place. In which case, I seriously suggest that you figure that out first before you start destroying what is currently at least keeping us from descending into absolute chaos. So for me, that's the scary thing, is that this can keep on creeping in, but at the end of the day, if it just continues, what will replace it?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, we have about 15 minutes left. Is there any other story you want to share from your experience? And then we'll start taking questions.
Um, no, I think I've covered about the main issues that I wanted to get through.
Great. And I just want to say again, thank you so much for coming on and being brave to tell your story. I really think that these kinds of conversations need to happen, and people need to know that this is a serious matter. And I agree with you 100%. Education, I've always said, education is something that can empower people. A lot of people ask, like, how do we fix South Africa? And I've always said, education. Fix education, not just in terms of its funding and making sure that teachers stay in the class and you give students proper books, but also what you're teaching them is so important. These are the people that are the future of our nation and the world, and they're the ones that are going to for better or worse, take care of the earth and the country. So you don't know who you're influencing. That might be the next president, the next minister, the next doctor, the next whatever lawyer. And it needs to be a type of free thinking environment so that everyone can make a decision for themselves and be also yearn or desire for more knowledge. And telling people like, oh, but you have to think this way is not breeding free thinking, logical individuals. It's just an army. So I'm just going to look at some of the questions that came through here right from the beginning. So I already addressed the Bianca situation. Once again, I am more than happy to have her and you talk openly about some of these critical thinking ideas and stuff like that. So Quentin wanted me to ask you, can you please ask, how should philosophers attempt to find truth, and how do critical theorists get this process wrong? I think we did touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, as far as I'm concerned, you shouldn't have a safe. So one of the ways it's starting to taint philosophy is that in my university, a lot of the lecturers were starting to have dual appointments where they would be partly in the critical theory department, partly in the philosophy department. So then it's kind of it's moving over to philosophy. I don't see why. I mean, again, critical theory, if it's a separate department, it seems to me that just in virtue of studying it, you're already committed to a particular assumption without having had the go through the effort of proving in some way that the oppression you're addressing actually exists. So as far as I'm concerned, and since critical theory is also supposed to be interdisciplinary, so it's supposed to draw on sociology, psychology, it's supposed to draw on all the disciplines, I don't see why it needs to sit in a separate department. If anything, it should just be part of philosophical inquiry, because it is essentially supposed to aim at truth. It's not about destabilizing this idea of Western society per se. It's about trying to correct it by creating these forms of oppression. So as far as I'm concerned, the only worry I see is that it's creeping into philosophy, where philosophers are going to start, because they know this is now what's considered, well, I can say trendy, but it's now the thing that people are interested in, and so they know that they can get published if they like. And it is important for them that they do get published as part of their jobs.
Yeah.
So I'm worried that they jump on the bandwagon so that they can get publications, then actually being philosophers and subjecting it to the scrutiny it's supposed to be subjected to.
That's amazing that's amazing because I think that kind of trickles down into other aspects of life. Like in our social everyday, before lockdown, when you used to hang out with friends and stuff, you would say certain things and wear a certain mask because you were afraid that your opinion might be scrutinized and you don't want to lose a friendship, for example. In the same way, these guys want to be published because obviously that's how they get paid and stuff. It's the same with, I'll say it, it's the same with comedians. Some comedians, I'm not saying that they're all like this. I'm saying that some of them might actually believe in what it is they're saying, fine. But they won't say anything that goes against the narrative because they're scared to lose their upcoming gig. I'm an example. It happened to me. I spoke out a little bit. I made a tweet about Donald Trump, and then I got canceled. An example of what I've been theorizing for a while, that some people are scared to have opinions in society because of the of this collectiveness thinking, and it's been proven time and time again, and it's that aspect that you just spoke of. I feel also just somehow has just leaked into society.
Yeah, and I'm very comfortable saying that I think Trevor Noah has done that. I've completely lost respect for him.
I think a lot of people would agree with you, and I do too.
I don't think he's funny. I think he literally just the same talking points, the same democratic talking points again and again. His jokes are just, and I really resent the fact that when he was nailed for the joke he made about Aboriginals, that he turned on his own audience and basically sold them out by apologizing for a joke that everyone at the time laughed at.
Yeah, but that is what most celebrities are doing now anyway. They're apologizing for things they did back in the day, even though they haven't been. No one's brought it up. I mean, like again, Showmax making that decision is appalling to me.
Yeah. So
Uh,
yes, and so it is. It's very dangerous, and yeah, he's been a huge disappointment to me.
I'm just looking for any more questions. A lot of people are just making statements and agreeing with what we're saying. There's there was one question about is there an end to critical theory, which I think we did touch on, which was your point of like, yeah, but if we do now live in this world that you want, what now?
Yeah.
Which kind of answers that question.
So, I mean, look, what I would say, I would be just be critical of the left and say what you're engaging in. I know you think it's critical theory, but I don't actually think what it is critical theory, because even critical theorists would. So Horkheimer, for example, he has three conditions that will make something conform to being the critical theory that what they actually mean by it. And so he thinks that what you have to be able to explain what the current reality is. So you need to be able to articulate essentially what the form of oppression is. And I'm assuming along with that, prove that it exists.
Mm.
Then you have to identify agents of change.
Mm.
Then you have to come up with actual norms and an actual program for social transformation. So he actually is committed to the idea of articulating what that transformation looks like, that positive project. So what I'm saying is that the reason why people often get confused between critical theory and postmodernism is because the left is confused.
Mm.
They can't switch between them as they like, because they honestly there's so many inconsistencies in their views that they can't keep it straight anymore. So in fact, I would just say that they're very bad at critical theory.
Absolutely. Here's one from Morvain. Thank you so much for tuning in, buddy. Please go subscribe to his channel. He's been doing a lot of cool documentaries about South Africa, and he's been releasing them in parts. So please, oh my word, it's you can see he took time. He gets clips, facts. Please go subscribe to his channel if you haven't yet. He's asking you a question, Doctor. Have you not looked at James Lindsay's project, Critical Theory? Just FYI, was a communist project.
It's a communist project.
But he's saying I think it's his opinion that it was a communist project.
Oh, okay. No, I haven't looked at it yet.
Right.
But I do need to say that it's not necessarily. So if you're a critical theorist, it doesn't mean that you're automatically committed to that. But it could be. I know I haven't. I'll look into it.
Yeah, I think like is that's actually a fair question to ask. Critical theory, right? You've explained it now. You've defined it quite well. Marxism, communist. There are aspects that maybe those ideologies take from critical theory, if I can put it that way. Would you say that they're...
Well, yeah, because one form of oppression has been the historical one of capitalists, and so yeah, that's one power dynamic that has for the longest time been scrutinized. So yes, it would form part of it.
Okay.
But it doesn't. You don't necessarily have to go that way. I mean, the other ones would be feminist theory, racial theory, post-colonialism. So there's a whole host of power dynamics you could explore.
Okay. Wotan saying, anyone else notice all the autonomy stuff on the shelf?
Well, actually, this isn't my office.
Okay. Good that you clarified that. I don't see any other questions. Yeah, everyone's chatting amongst themselves. Unfortunately, Morben said something in Afrikaans, and I don't know Afrikaans, so I can't comment on it. But it seems other people are.
Okay.
So Morben, if you don't mind saying what you said in Afrikaans in English, so I can pop it up. Otherwise, yeah, we have 4 minutes left. And I once again want to thank you for coming onto the show and giving us your story. I would love to have you back. If we find a topic that's worth talking about, feel free. Even if there's something maybe you want to talk about, that at any time, just you have my number now. Just say, hey Joe, I want to talk about Bianca. I want to talk about Conrad. Then we'll talk.
Thanks very much. No, I really enjoyed it.
I think, yeah, if notobody else has any questions, then I'm trying to think if there's anything else I should ask. But I think we covered some pretty good space and topics, and I think this would definitely be valuable to some people. Here's a question, though, and I think this is a good question. You made a choice to, once you discovered all these things that were happening, you made a choice to say, you know what, it's not for me, I'm getting out. And I think Quentin did the same thing. Now, do you think there is a way to fight the system? Do you think there is a way to stand up to these universities that are doing this and kind of point out their flaw?
So my sister is also an academic, and so we've been talking about this for a long time. I felt guilty when I left because I felt that I should stay and I should fight the good fight and I should make a difference for as long as I can. Um, but it was towards the end of my PhD that I realized no, there. I mean, I also came back to South Africa and I taught. Um, I'm not going to say where, but I taught at a university here, and that's also when I realized no, there's no changing it. For me, at this point, the academy should fall. I don't say that lightly, but the academy should fall. And I think at this point that if you are supporting it, if you are perpetuating it, and you know that what you're look, there are always exceptions. So there are always departments or there institutes or there centers that do really great work and that try and educate still. But if you are part of that system that you're basically just trying to keep your job and perpetuate your job, knowing that you are party to all of this and turning a blind eye, then honestly, there's so many people that are doing that, then there is no hope. I would rather have the academy collapse and have us start again because this is a failed project at this point.
And do you know of anyone that is maybe attempting to redefine the system?
Yeah, I do know some people
So there are
that
people
are
that are
actually
fighting. Yeah, there are people that are fighting the good fight.
trying to work around the system to try and still provide quality education. It's rare, but they are still trying. Um, but even when I was teaching here, they literally went behind my back to bump the marks in my course.
Wow.
And that's the approach that all universities now take. They bump marks because the government expects them to have a certain meet a certain standard. The students cannot meet it because they're not good enough.
Mm.
So we either lower our standards or we bump marks. It's completely corrupt.
Wow. Yeah, that just shows that we do need to just make it. We need to scrap it and rethink the process. But again, thank you so much for giving us your voice and being willing to talk about this. I hope that everybody that watches this will share this video, tell people to watch it. I want to keep it to an hour so it doesn't scare anyone off. I really want people to watch this.
Yeah.
So we're going to end it here. Once
Thank you.
again, Doctor, thank you so much for coming onto the show and being willing to tell your story. I see people in the comments are saying I'll vote for Unati. So okay, I think there's some kind of revolution happening in my live chats. It's cool. You've inspired us. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for tuning in. Please make sure that this video gets out far and wide so that people can start talking about this, and we can show that there are people that experience this, and the more people that are willing to talk out and speak up, we might actually see some change. So once again, Doctor, thank you so much. Is there anything you want to say in closing?
No, I just want to say thank you very much for having me on. I really enjoyed it. And I hope you get some really good comments so we can come back for round 2.
Fantastic. I like that idea. Yeah, that's actually a good point. Anybody that has opposing views or wants specific questions, please leave a comment in the comment section below. If there's enough comments and there's enough to talk about, we'll definitely do a round 2. And one more time, Bianca, in peace, let's have a debate. Let's talk. Let me know. Anyway, for those of you who watched, once again, thank you so much. Have a good night. Have a good weekend. And I will see you at the next one. Be safe, ladies and gentlemen. Bye.